Webcam microphone up close.
Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
But I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, days and the final slab of choice, I don't know that doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they just read two sources whenever I try to prove out one of these things. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
I damn sure know I'm an original. We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for
That's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And it's live, UCY.TV radio. This is the Ochelli Effect. I am Chuck Ochelli. Well, as we know, every Tuesday I do my Liberty Beacon Spotlight, the Liberty Beacon Tuesday. And I got to tell you, I'm a little distracted at the moment, but I'm not going to comment on that right now. It's just one of those things, I guess. And, I'm going to very shortly add in Roger Landry to the discussion if all goes well, which, at this point, I guess we'll just have to see. Roger, of course, is the founder and one of the best voices for the Liberty Beacon, and he is usually my first guest in the first hour for Tuesdays, and I believe I have Roger on the line. Good evening, Roger.
I believe you do too, and how are you, Chuck?
Well, I've been better, sir, I got to be honest with you, but what can I say? You sound a little distant, though.
Do I sound better now?
Oh, yes, much, much better.
It helps when you take the boom mic and move it down across your mouth instead of over the top of your head.
Well, yeah, if only the mouth was on the top of your head, it would work better that way, right?
I don't know about that, because then all of those nano-sized particles of aluminum falling from the chemtrails would fall right into your mouth.
Well, one way or another, they end up there anyway, don't they?
This is true. You got to breathe.
You have to breathe no matter what, even if you make different choices with your food and with your information streams, et cetera, et cetera. Let's be honest, everybody's got to breathe, and everybody's got to drink water at some point. Or something, at least mixed with water, some sort of water-based solution, because there's plenty of people that live, many, many years without actually drinking pure water of any kind, but enough of that. Anyway, yeah.
You sound a little on the dejected side, and I don't know exactly what it is, but usually you're a little bit more bubbly.
Yeah, I try to be, but, certain things happen, and it's just,
I do.
I'll get over it. That's all I can say. I'll do what I got to do, and here we are. I'm not trying to sound down, folks. Really, I'm not. It's just the way it is. I apologize in advance for probably what's going to sound like a little bit flat tonight, but you know what? Better
anyway, spark you up
because Roger. Exactly. I was just going to say, I know Roger will lift the energy level of the show one way or another. So don't tune out just because your host sounds totally dejected, as Roger put it.
No, you don't sound that bad. It was a personal thing. I mean, having listened to you talk many times I can usually tell when you're on a downbeat, and that's fine, because the article I brought with me today, I don't know if you had a chance to look through it, is a commentary I wrote, and when I get done going through this, you're going to have a lot of things to talk about.
All right. So, are you ready to get to it then?
Oh, absolutely. I'm always ready to get to it.
I was just going to say, you're always ready to go, Roger. I know it's a facetious question, but I figured I would just ask it for the audience's benefit. But I do know you're always ready, sir. And again, thelibertybeacon.com. I'm telling you, you got to go there. You got to see the articles. I post the stuff on Facebook all the time. There's also a Facebook page for it. And hey, look for Roger Landry, too, because just on his own page, you see lots of fascinating stuff as well. And there's a whole group of people that we feature every single, there's my trick on my tongue, we feature every single week here Tuesday nights on the Ochelli Effect. So without further ado, Mr. Landry, go right ahead.
And your favorite website in the Liberty Beacon Project is?
TheFallingDarkness, all one word, .com.
Yes, sir. And I love it because, as I tell everybody, if the Liberty Beacon website is the center of our project, the Falling Darkness is the edge of the project. Okay, and a real quick note, we are adding 3 more websites to the project. We will have a media site up and running, which will facilitate a radio network, an internet television network, and a few other surprises. We're also setting up a website called Middle East Rising, which will have boots on the ground reporting straight from the Middle East, no mainstream media in between, no nothing, including live streaming. And we are also setting up a website for the ex-CDC EPA PhD microbiologist who turned whistleblower, and that, of course, is Dr. David Lewis. We'll be setting up a website for him as well to report on health issues as they affect not only his local population, but the entire population of this country and the globe.
Right, and in all fairness, I just want to say that it's worth a search. Don't necessarily use Google, but if you have to, go ahead.
Yeah,
definitely worth a search to go find Dr. David Lewis, because that's an interesting story in and of itself. And
go to the Liberty Beacon. We have 2 recorded shows with him, 2 articles that he has written. He is now a full-blown partner of the Liberty Beacon Project, and a project him and I just discussed today, and I can't go into details, but I'm gonna give you a tickler, okay? We discussed starting a project today that would have global ramifications and would absolutely put the kibosh and embarrass the hell out of the EPA, the CDC, the USDA, and the FDA. It would and it's going to be done by a grassroots organization. We're going to do what they should have done 2 decades ago and have failed to do, simply because if they did, their complicity would be screaming out at the top of its lungs.
And it is great to hear that you're going to be starting up that entire multimedia project as well. I've heard little bits and pieces about it. One thing before you get into the article, and I'm sorry to do this to you, but
no, go ahead.
It's
your show.
Well, we had lots of discussions about the Earthship Solution community in Colorado, and then very suddenly I wasn't talking about it anymore, so I got asked.
And I will tell.
So please do.
Okay. The Earthship Solutions is on pause. It is not on bye-bye. It's not gone away. And the reason is sometimes the best laid plans of mice and men don't always work out in the fashion you wish they would. Once we decided to do that project, it was late May, early April. And at that point, we couldn't even marshal our resources on site until mid-June or early July. At that point, to plant the crop which would have supported the community, which is hemp, 20 acres of hemp is a cash crop value of between $150,000 and $200,000. These were the funds we were going to use to facilitate the project. But being as we couldn't even get a crop into the ground until early to mid-July, there is no way the crop would have matured. It would never have gone to seed. It needs a good 4 months. So what we realized was that, and we will not beat the bushes and ask people for money. That's not us, okay? We will find...
Yeah, I know that that's not going to happen, number one, but I wanted to make it really clear that this was more of an agricultural concern because of the season that you needed to be able to do what you needed to do, and the timing. That's all it was. So basically, it needs to be delayed until the funds can be generated by the community itself, which is the intent for it to be a self-sustaining.
Actually, not.
It's supposed to be self-sustaining, though.
Right. But actually, what's going to happen is it was just getting the crop in, because we could have borrowed money against the crop if the crop was planted and we can prove we were going to have a yield, okay? So that wasn't the issue. It wasn't the money, because the money would have been available if the crop was in, and the money is what we needed to facilitate the project. So we have already contacted farmers in the area who will till the 20 acres and air seed that 20 acres in May, so that we will have a full growing season and a guaranteed mature crop. At that point, we can start to build the structure, so on and so forth, and the money we will need to do that can be borrowed through local businesses, so on and so forth, against the crop. So the viability wasn't there last year, and for all of our eagerness to jump into this, we didn't realize how not getting the crop in time was going to snowball and affect the entire project. So this year, we're going to have the crop in before April 1st instead of mid-July or late June. So we're going to be guaranteed a viable crop. Thus, the community is going to be worked on starting in probably about the 1st of April and moving forward. So by the time it's time to harvest the crop, we will have drying sheds, we will have a water source in place, we will have living quarters in place. So everything pretty much hinged on getting that crop in last year. And when we finally figured we would never get a mature crop, planting it that late, that's why we put things on hold. And I apologize for not giving you this information earlier, because I know you were heavy on that project, and you should have been one of the first ones we told so that you could have updated people. And there's my apology, sir, but now everybody is aware. Earthshift Solutions was not forgotten. It was just delayed until April. Come mid-December, we will start pushing the project again, talking about it, promoting it, looking for volunteers, whatever. So you'll start hearing that probably just before Christmas.
Oh, excellent. Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because, it just seemed to disappear, and I could see how somebody would say, hey, what happened with that, so we just wanted to make sure about that. But now, we have this article, and I'm glad you cleared all that up, but this article, which is a commentary, and I did not get a chance to read it, but you know what, I'm going to enjoy it right along with the audience, so without further ado, go right ahead, sir.
I'm kind of glad you didn't get a chance to read it, because your reactions will be spontaneous, and I love you when you're spontaneous, Chuck. I really do. All right.
Glad somebody does.
This comment, being two peas in the pod, it's all good. The article is named "A Republic in Crisis and Tea Time for Obama." And I don't mean the tea in your cup. All right. And again, this is a commentary, and I will tell everybody, if you go to the Liberty Beacon and look the article up, again, A Republic in Crisis and Tea Time for Obama. And it's not the word "and," it's the ampersand.
Okay.
All right. And at the bottom of this is a 6.5-minute video that I strongly recommend everybody watch. It's 6.5 minutes of your time. But what is said in that video is so in your face. I watched the video and it prompted me to write the preface or the commentary I'm about to go through. And here we go.
Okay.
All right. All presidencies have issues, a crisis, and maybe even a disaster. But never before in my 3 generations on this planet have I seen such poor leadership. So much indecisiveness, so few right answers, and so many national disasters in progress are looming just in front of us. Even the most staunch supporters of this president are losing faith, as is readily apparent in the latest polls. I have seen lame duck terms before, but I have never seen dead duck terms.
Wow.
Now, before you jump bad with what you're about to read or what I'm about to read for you and say, all our woes are not his doing, I agree. I totally agree. But please tell me one promise he made twice, because he's been elected twice, okay, that he has kept to facilitate and to end this madness. Yeah, he ran on a platform twice to alleviate most of the boogeymen that haunt this country, but has produced nothing, and in most cases, the exact opposite of anything he promised. And this statement is very, very easy to prove. This president is presiding over the most turmoil America has seen in recent history. Yet, he has more tea times under his belt and more hyper-expensive vacations than just about any other president in American history. While we the people tighten our belts until our stomachs touch our backbones, he is enjoying the high life extraordinaire. No, I don't begrudge him a vacation. I don't begrudge him a tea time on occasion. But, by God, research this yourself. Okay. Here we have just a few. I call it the short list, because if I had to mention them all, I would have been writing for a month.
And we take up this entire show with it.
Yeah. Well, a lot more than this show.
Oh, yeah.
So here are just a few, again, the short list of the present and impending disasters, unresolved or exacerbated manyfold in the 6 years he has occupied the Oval Office. We the people are facing the above. Can this possibly be a monumental case of incompetence or an intentional means to an end? ... So let me list a few. We have a wide open southern border allowing just about anyone to cross unimpeded, such as terrorists, all but mandated by this government. And we can talk about that after I read this. Okay. Wait, hold on a minute. Didn't he swear to uphold the Constitution? And isn't one of the constitutional responsibilities or mandates of the president to protect the sovereignty and borders of this country? That is one of their most impending directions. Next, we are being threatened by some of the most ruthless radicals in history of our own construction, while we continue to manufacture new and more terrorists across the Middle East with our blatant militaristic imperialism. Wait, didn't he run on the promise to end this imperialism, not to compound it manyfold? Next, we have multiple government health agencies that are so corrupt that their policies are sacrificing the lives of millions of citizens and children, all for the sake of the corporatocracy, and with zero accountability to these agencies. Hold on. Didn't he sign the Farm Bill containing the Monsanto Protection Act after promising to give us transparency on GMOs in our food because Americans have the right to know what they eat? Next, we are being poisoned on a daily basis beyond any conceivable, beyond anything conceivable in generations, by mechanisms such as geoengineering, fluoride, vaccines, GMOs, environmental toxins, and pharmaceuticals, to a point where the cognitive functionality of most Americans is at a grade school level. And I proved this, the last article I wrote, where I put 4 videos in there where people walk the street asking adults and college students 4th and 5th grade level questions, things that 4th and 5th graders needed to know to graduate to the next level, and 99% of them couldn't answer these basic level questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wait a minute, hold on a second. Doesn't he appoint the heads of these government agencies, knowing full well before he does this exactly where their loyalties lie, what jobs they just came from, and what jobs they're going to move into after his administration is over and a new president appoints somebody else from Monsanto or from Merrick to run these agencies? Next. The dollar is collapsing at an ever-increasing rate. Our economy is taking a negative direction continuously, regardless of the lies we're being told daily. The middle class has all but disappeared, yet we continue to spend over 50 cents of every tax dollar collected to support the most awesome military this planet has ever seen. Wait a minute! Didn't he run on a campaign of anti-war? Anti-corporatist favoritism? Wasn't he a Democrat? Isn't he a Democrat? Next, we continue to use the concept of baseball bat diplomacy across the planet, infuriating sovereign nation after nation with a totally cavalier attitude of, what are you going to do about it? And nations who can do something about it, such as Russia and China, are already teaming up to do something about it. Thus, the BRICS nations. Is this guy nuts? The American people are suffering more under this president's leadership, or lack of, than any president since the Great Depression, and that only takes into account the economic woes. America is failing on all fronts except global brutality. And this fiasco continues to spin out of control at an ever-accelerating pace. And Obama goes golfing.
Mm.
Done.
Well, that is.
Please watch the video. Please watch the video.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've seen this video before, but I got to tell you, it's just as amazing every time I view it. Watching these people try to answer these questions, it would be comical if it weren't so sad.
No, this is a different video. This is a video where a commentator absolutely shows the disconnect between Obama and things like our ambassador being killed in a Libyan embassy, or anyway, and Obama went to bed early because he had a fundraiser the next day, and it was more important for him to be bright and cheerful for the adulation of the crowd than it was to find out that 4 Americans lost their lives when something could have been done about it. And the same thing is happening with ISIL. Okay, he's fully aware that ISIL is a construct of the CIA, MI6, and the Mossad. So all he does is him and haw about it. There is no direction. There is no leadership. And I could go on and on. This is a 6-minute video that talks about his disconnect with every major disaster or impending disaster that's facing the American people. And Obama goes golfing.
Well, see, I also thought you had that video up there again with the guy asking the questions where they couldn't.
Oh no! But they should go. They should definitely read that article and watch those 4 videos, because they are absolutely jaw-dropping. The amount of ignorance, not stupidity, because stupidity is having the knowledge and doing the wrong thing with it. Ignorance is not having the knowledge, so you don't know what to do.
Well, you know, okay. two things I'm going to bring up to you right here, and this is one thing I was waiting to hear in the article, and for once you actually didn't include something I was thinking.
I couldn't make it 30 pages.
It's okay. It's one minor point, or it might be a minor point depending on how you look at it. I don't see it as a minor point, because this is one of my main problems, is that this was also supposed to be not only the transparent president regarding your food, but But there was supposed to be transparency regarding, all of our wonderful intelligence agencies, Roger. And meanwhile, they have actually classified more documents under the Obama administration. There's more literal sheets of paper that are being deemed classified under the Obama administration than any other presidency in history, as far as we know.
And before I sign a bill or create an executive order, it will be publicized and run on C-SPAN so that everybody can see it and have time to give us some feedback on it. My dying ass.
Yeah, good luck with that one. Exactly. Oh, boy. And, it reminds me of one of the things that I got in trouble for years ago, discussing this disconnect
with him. It wasn't for saying that word on your show, was it?
No, not at all.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. No problem. I've got more freedom than I usually allow myself in this show.
I don't usually get vulgar at all, but that's about the hardest word I ever use.
It's okay, Roger, really. It's fine by me, and, but look, I got in trouble years ago, and here's why. I used to write pieces to help certain journalists out, actually. I used to write background pieces. And at one point, and I was writing editorials, too, about different issues. And the State of the Union address a few years back, when the TSA was still a very large sort of looming issue in people's minds. You don't hear about it so much anymore, to be honest with you.
Redirection. Of course not.
Of course not. But the thing was, he was saying things about the economy and how bad it was, and, how people should go and enjoy trains and things like this, trains and buses, because after all, he made a joke. I kid you not, I can't remember the exact quote, but he made a joke basically about not getting felt up at the airport. Okay? And I was so disgusted that I ripped off a bunch of editorials to every newspaper that I could think of, every newspaper that I could find an address for in the New York and New Jersey area. Okay?
That's a lot.
Yeah, and I went down to the post office literally with 30 handwritten pieces of mail, okay? And I'm telling you, handwritten pieces of mail. I didn't even play around with the emails or anything else. I'm not going to say I didn't send emails in addition to, but I literally hand wrote 30 letters, okay? Sent them out. Now, not very surprising. Not too many places, even acknowledge that they received them or anything like that. You didn't see any of my editorials published, but a brief commentary did appear on the New York Post's website.
Okay.
Okay, attributed to me, which wasn't exactly what I said, but I didn't disagree necessarily with the spirit of it. Now, somehow or other, I got attacked for this by people that just sort of, and I didn't have a radio show, I just was kind of a YouTube channel guy, and people went after me for being a racist, for basically stating that I was completely disgusted that the chief executive of this country could make jokes about people being felt up at the airport. I mean, he doesn't have to do that. I mean, obviously. And, what is the problem here? You mean to tell me that as the representative of the people, because, each individual area or whatever is sort of, represented by your congresspeople, ostensibly, not really, but, your senators, but not really. And, but the thing is, obviously they represent who backs their campaigns, and that's the way that is. But see, the president is supposed to be sort of the spokesperson who makes these kind of, or at least, I know it's an antiquated idea, but he was supposed to be speaking for the American people, right? So how are you speaking for the American people when there are people that are traumatized over going through the airport and having been molested, essentially, by rent-a-cops who are... I don't even want to get into it because I don't want to attack the TSA people generally because, everybody needs a job and,
No, you leave that up to the likes of me because I'll rip into them and leave a hole so big you can drive a Mack truck through it.
Well, yeah, but the fact that he was joking about this, and you probably recall this.
I do.
During his State of the Union address. This is his joke for the State of the Union. And that, to me, was outrageous because... It showed clearly that this guy had no clue about what it was like to even be a regular person. There was no sort of, I know he had been a community organizer, and we could get into his whole, supposed history and whatever, but let's leave that all alone. Let's just go from the point at which he became the president. Okay? Let's just go from there. You mean to tell me that this is acceptable? And...
Well... Look, that all goes back to the point I made about disconnect.
Right.
When you are the commander-in-chief, of the most powerful
military this planet has ever seen, which he is doing his best to neuter, but that's another conversation altogether. And your consulate is being attacked in Benghazi. And any pictures you see of him, he's sitting in the back of the room. As commander-in-chief, he should have been the guy standing up in the front of the room saying, it needs to be this, He was in the back of the room looking totally disconnected and decided to go to bed early because he had a fundraiser the next morning. Are you freaking kidding me?
Well, see, not only that, but I mean, the amazing part to me is that despite the fact that that even his own people are basically not supporting him at this point, publicly they make these half like hearted statements regarding supporting his supposed strategy, which isn't really a strategy, and all that came up. It's not a that was accurate. I got to give him that. It's not a strategy. Of course not. There is no strategy because I think that really the narrative has been manufactured again. And of course this is meant to explain away the people that we armed again and all that. But hey, why not? But meanwhile, the rest of the world is not taking us seriously. I mean, they're not taking him seriously anyway.
Well, I'll tell you why, okay? And I have to stop you, and I apologize at this point because, well, again, you put something into my brain that's so apropos, okay? Mm-hmm. There isn't anybody on this planet who is awake and aware, that by now does not realize that ISIL is a construct of the intelligence agencies of the United States, Great Britain, and Israel. And we, at one point, because the elitists want Syria so bad. They want to go in and do the same thing in Syria that they did in Afghanistan, that they did in Iraq. They want to beat the population to its knees so they can't interfere as big national or global corporations go in and rape that country of everything it has, and there's a lot in Syria to rape, okay? We tried once before, but we got major blowback, not only from the United States, but from Putin, okay? So that stalled. So now you manufacture a terrorist organization and turn it loose on not only Iraq, but also Syria. And now the United States is being asked to come in. Hey, you can't be leaving Iraq. You got to come in and help us with this. So now basically what has been done is a means and a mechanism for the United States to enter Syria and do their bombing and eventually do a ground invasion is much more pliable, much more acceptable, and the United States population is being propagandized at the total evil, which they are, but remember, we manufactured them, of ISIL to the point where they're all going to stand up, or a vast majority of this brain-dead country is going to stand up and say, go in there and kill them all!
Well, right.
So what we've done, what they have managed to do very effectively, is turn the negative reaction of a U.S. intervention into a sovereign Syria into a go in and kill them all.
Well, Roger, problem, reaction, solution. I mean, big surprise there. You know what amazes me is that people forgot, all of those access. Remember the access of evil? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Wasn't Syria part of that? I mean, wasn't that?
Yeah.
Okay, and that got stalled back then because people said, well, they're not doing anything. There was actually, public opinion that was not exactly fully under control globally, let's just say. The American people were ready to do just about anything because, after all, we had been attacked in the terrorist attacks of 9/11. So, therefore, anybody who was from the Middle East was suspect. I mean, after all, Saddam Hussein had something to do with it, although he didn't. And he had weapons of mass destruction, although he didn't.
And he had been begging the United States not to invade, promising to do anything they asked for 6 months prior to the invasion. And I have a recorded show with this ex-CIA operative where she was directly in communication face-to-face with Saddam Hussein, who is telling her over and over again, I will do anything they want. Don't attack Iraq. But did you ever hear about that?
See, there were various meetings that started even before the invasion of Afghanistan, which I happen to know of. Now, I don't know who this female CIA operative was.
I will dig out the show and get it to you.
But I do know that there was at least 2 male CIA operatives that I've spoken to that told me essentially the same thing, which is that he was willing to make any bargain pretty much with the Western powers that they would accept.
He was even going to buy 1 million automobiles for Iraq to boost our economy.
Right. He was willing to make economic deals. He was willing to deal off the oil that everybody said we needed to go get. He was willing to compromise on that, give him a better price, putting himself in harm's way pretty much with his neighbors who weren't willing
with
to.
OPEC. Yes.
Yeah, because exactly that's what I was going to bring up next. OPEC wasn't going to put up with that very well, but he was willing to do all of that to hang on to his no-fly state, and it still wasn't enough. You see, and I hate to use this analogy, but the bottom line is that it's like begging with a rapist. You're not going to get him to stop.
Actually, what you're going to do is encourage them more because they want to hear you beg.
There you go. And this is what it was, this is on a national scale. Of course, it's not our nation that's, being hit by this particular power play, but actually it is in a way. Because here goes our resources, here goes our debt going up, here goes our, men and women that have to go in harm's way, et cetera, et cetera. And what are we left with? And looked like, well, okay, there you go.
I popped off for a second. I don't know why, but no problem.
It's okay. You're back. I was wondering what happened there, but essentially, this was something. There was a fait accompli. There was no way that we were not going into Iraq. And for those who have said, well, we achieved our goals in Iraq and we already achieved victory. Now we're going back. I take issue with that because when did we leave? Really, we have.
If you consider the residual military, what most people don't understand, let's throw another little card into the deck here, okay? For every soldier they pulled out, they put in at least 1 or more mercenaries. And let me explain something to you about a mercenary. Whereas a ground pounder, a Marine, or a soldier might earn $30,000 a year, these mercenaries are making anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 a year. And there are mercenary companies out there that are making hundreds of millions of dollars off of the war in Iraq, the war that continues in Afghanistan. There were 2,600 people killed in Iraq. No, excuse me, 1,600. 2,600 killed in Syria, 1,600 plus killed in Iraq last month alone.
Well, right, and meanwhile, what we're confronted with, as far as the mainstream goes, of course, is the beheading of this journalist, and then when that didn't happen, which I'm sorry, but the video is suspect at best. I'll put it that way.
That is the worst production I have ever seen. I've seen B-rated porn movies that have more credibility than that.
See, now
wait a minute. Did I just admit I watched a B-rated movie? Oops!
You just did that. You just did. Okay. I was going to try to stop you, but I couldn't.
No, I did that intentionally because it makes the point as starkly as I possibly could.
But of course, notice that after that, when that didn't seem to whip up enough of a public sentiment to cause the American people to once again say, no, we need to go deal with these terrorists. Fight them over there before we have to fight them over here. Remember those old kind of canned statements? No, that didn't work. So now they had to say, no, there was a mass execution. There have been many mass executions, crucifixions, but a mass execution of 250 Syrian soldiers. Also very suspect. That video, ladies and gentlemen. But the narrative continues, doesn't it? And meanwhile, Why are we involved in this? This is what I can't. I still, and I know what the explanations are, but realistically,
let me get a little further into this topic of disconnect, okay?
please.
And it's not even so much a disconnect; it's knowing your place.
See now. Oh, wait a second. Wait, this is where I wanted you to go. I'm so glad you're going here because this is exactly where I wanted to go, and I'm not going to do it. You are. So go ahead.
If you look into this guy's history, you will find that he was a virtual playboy. That when things got tough going at Columbia, he checked out. When things got tough going in Hawaii, he checked out. When things got tough going in Chicago, he checked out. Okay? This guy didn't have the staying power anywhere. But he has walked down the yellow brick road his entire life, having the velvet rope moved aside to allow him to pass over and over again. He has walked an elitist path that can only have been choreographed. And he was never, ever there for his ability, his statesmanship, his massive intellect. He was there because he looked good in front of the camera. He said what he was supposed to say, and he never stepped off that yellow brick road. So now we've got a guy in the White House. And if you look at almost every major crisis we have, if he doesn't have a teleprompter in front of him, he stammers and stutters like he's absolutely brain dead. Okay? He is an actor, and he's a good actor in a lot of cases. But if you look and read into the pictures that you see of him in the midst of a crisis where he's got the war room around him or he's got his political advisors around him, he's the guy in the room who looks like he's thinking about his next tea time. He's never sitting at the head of the table. And a lot of times you will find out that he has left that meeting long before decisions are made because he knows his place. His place is not as a leader of this country. His head is his position is the head puppet. Mm-hmm. The decisions are not and never have been made by this guy. And it is becoming more and more apparent to many people, including his own supporters that surround him, that he has nothing to add to the argument. And that he's better off by going to bed early. I wouldn't be surprised if his advisors sitting in that room in Benghazi said, well, you know, you look tired, Mr. President, and you do realize that you have to be in front of millions of people tomorrow at a fundraiser, sucking up all the adulation, so it might be better if you just went and got some rest. Because that's what he did. Any president worth his weight in anything, in beans, would have stayed there and said, hell no, Americans are dying. You couldn't budge me from here with a stick of dynamite. Well, this guy is not the leader of this country. He is the commander in puppet.
Exactly. The meat puppet in chief, I like to say sometimes.
So was that what you were expecting from me?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because, you know, this is the reality with this guy. I mean, look, I'll give him this, though. You know, he does look pretty good on the camera, and he is better than the average newscaster. But, you know, that's about it. That's about it. If he doesn't have a script to read, he's in a lot of trouble. And we've seen that over and over again. But
is there anybody out there to date that has been found that can prove that this guy attended classes at Columbia on a regular basis? Anybody, including the people who attended the exact same class he did for years. Is there anybody from Occidental? Is there any? I could give you a list as long as my arm. Is there anybody? The one thing that stands out absolutely clearly about this individual is that when the heat comes up, he checks out.
Absolutely, and like you said, quite often to a golf tee.
Yep.
Or
to a $3 million vacation, while more Americans are living below the poverty level than at any point in the history of this country, including the Great Depression. Now, people tell me the Great Depression brought America to its knees. Let me explain something to all of you that you don't put into the equation. The Great Depression had an unemployment rate, real time, of between 20 and some say as high as 23%. The real-time unemployment rate in this country, if you go do enough research and digging, is over 25%. Why aren't we suffering as badly as they did in the Great Depression? Because we have welfare, because we have food stamps, because we have Social Security, because we have WIC. We have a safety net that keeps people living above or slightly above or at the poverty level so that they can maintain at least a basic level of existence. This didn't exist during the Great Depression. Americans are suffering more across the entire spectrum of the economic viability of this nation today than ever in our history. And this guy takes vacations that cost $2, $3, $4 million. And how many of them is he taking? Are you freaking kidding me? You're a man of the people. Prove it.
See, and we're here again. I cannot argue with you. This is the absolute truth. And here's another thing that they don't put into the equation. Okay, we know about, they tell us, what is it, 8% unemployment? I forget. I don't know.
It's 6.7%, I think they said.
Oh, it's lower now. Great. I'd love to see what that is, but okay. But another thing that people don't put into the equation is the value of the dollar, and it's not simply a matter of inflation. Well, things cost more, people make more. No, there's a very serious disparity there if you do the math. I point to this statistic because, in 1968, I studied a lot of things in the year 1968, so I wanted to get a general idea of the entire atmosphere of the time. And the problem here is that someone living on minimum wage back then, even though it was only about, I think $1.75 or $1.50, something like this per hour, okay? And everybody out there is saying, well, that's outrageous. How can you live on that? Well, here's the thing. In order for you to comparatively live the same way, okay, really, literally, price-wise and earning power-wise, even though your typical minimum wage is about $8 now or so an hour, $7, $8, something like that, depending on where you are. Okay, here's the problem: in order to live on the same level as that guy who was making $1.50 or $1.75 in 1968, you got to make about $25 an hour.
Do you know what a teacher earned as a salary in the mid to late 1960s? And I know this to be a fact because we had one in our family.
Well, not off the top of my head, but go right ahead.
Between $2,600 and $3,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's the problem. That $2,600 or $3,000 was enough to have a single person be sustainable.
Yes.
At that time. Your rents, I'm telling you, depending on where you were, of course, again, everything is different in each region. Each state is a bit, some places are more expensive to live, et cetera, et cetera. There's, financial concerns that go regionally. But if you average it out, when you've got rents of like $50, and your groceries for the month might be another $50, it's not so bad to earn $200 in a month. Because, again, that would be as if I was handing you, say, $5,000 a month now.
Well, another thing that most people don't understand, and this comes as a shock when I tell it to most people, is that the truth of the matter is, the dollar today is worth exactly what the dollar was worth in 2013. It is the inflation or the rise in prices of the commodities we need to sustain that basic level of living that have risen. The dollar has no less value 100 years ago than it does now. It is the product of the devaluation. They call it the devaluation of the dollar. The dollar has never been devaluated. The dollar is still worth 100 pennies. It will always be worth 100 pennies. But if the cost to manufacture something is going up, then the cost of that manufactured good goes up. It is the inflation of the cost of living that we are calling the devaluation of the dollar. The dollar is worth exactly the same thing as it has always been worth. But again, they've got us believing exactly the opposite of the truth.
Well, but here's the argument there, Roger, and I'll give you this. You're right to some degree, but here's the thing: if the same dollar, so many years ago, could buy you something that it cannot even possibly buy you now. I realize that is the cost of inflation because of manufacturing, because of, et cetera, wages.
Because of everything, shipping costs, everything compounds into it.
Right. But what has not kept pace here is individuals' earning potential has not kept pace with this increase.
I agree, and that has nothing to do with the dollar being devaluated. What that has to do with is utilizing mechanisms or laws and bills passed within the government in order to rape the public. And that's exactly what's happened. Okay? What we have in this country, or what we had when you and I were young, especially when I was young, I remember Ma Bell being broken up because it was a monopoly. Because they said it monopolized the phone system within this country. Today, bills are being passed in Congress that are shutting down mom and pop businesses across the country because they can't afford the regulations put in place. They can't afford the taxes they're paying. Some of these businesses are paying over 50% taxes on their business when you include all the different taxes that are thrown on their back. But now you look... Okay, now you look at a business like Monsanto, which is taking over 27% of all of the privately owned farms have gone bankrupt in recent history and basically been taken over by Big Agra. Okay, so what you have are laws being passed such as big corporations like Big Pharma, Merck, Dow, big chemical companies, or Raytheon, military industrial complex, or Monsanto, biotech, making billions of dollars globally every single year and paying nothing in tax. So what you're doing is you're producing an artificial mechanism to drive all of your competition, which is medium to smaller sized businesses, out of business and allowing you to move in and take over the customers or the regions they dominated in because somebody's got to sell that product. Well, what we have is people saying, in order for us to stay in business, we have to pay you less. One more thing before you jump in, okay? Obamacare. Obamacare says that if a company has a worker that works scheduled to work over 30 hours a week, you have to pay for medical for them. So all of a sudden you have this massive push. Anybody that doesn't believe it, first off, you're an idiot. Second off, Google this or Bing it, whatever you choose. This massive push to push what have been full-time employees for a very long time down to that 30-hour mark, or to hire in any new hires at 30 hours or less a week. Now, you're saying, okay, but they're still getting hired at the same wage. No, they're not. Because if you're over, I don't care if they're both making $18 an hour, that person who's working 40 hours a week is getting benefits, which include a really good medical plan. And if you take the cost of all of those benefits and you divide it up over a 40-hour week and add it to his his hourly wage, he's making 30 to 40 bucks an hour, and the poor clown who walked in at 29 or 30 hours a week is making $18 an hour. And he has to take the cost of that medical program now out of his own pocket, so in reality, he's making about $10 an hour. So there is where you see the huge wage disparity coming in. It is because the government, which is under the control of these massive corporations that own the government, are monopolizing and forcing any competition they have out. Monopolies used to be illegal in this country. Now they are all but mandated. Can you tell me where I'm wrong there, Chuck?
No, they're absolutely mandated. This is why every small town in this country, essentially, no longer has most of the mom-and-pop type organizations that they used to have. You don't have the small stores selling you milk and stuff anymore in most cases. They're owned by somebody. And even if they do exist, well, what happens is a Walmart plops itself down, a couple other things plop themselves down, and all of a sudden everything else disappears. This has happened over and over again, and people are surprised. I still don't understand it. I'm not, because look, how do you compete with an organization which A, doesn't have to pay taxes, B, has such a massive advantage when it comes to getting all sorts of other breaks? I mean, they get breaks on their fuel. Okay, yep. They get breaks on their on the rules when it comes to hiring employees. Yes, you can't even, if you go to even apply for a job at the Wally Mart or whatever, they're not going to offer you a full-time position.
They can blanket the entire local community with commercials and newspaper ads and everything. Mm-hmm. You know, hey, you can go to Harry's and get a burger for $4, and you can come to McDonald's and get the same burger for $1. Want to bet it isn't the same burger? Let's not even go there.
Oh, no, please, because that would be a whole other show. But the thing is, it's the reality. So how is if I wanted to go and open up a grill place and cook hamburgers, I thought of it, to be honest with you, but it's impossible. It's impossible at this point because I can't remotely compete with the prices. I can't afford to hire people, and I can't get a loan or anything else at this point. You know, that's another thing, of course, the lines of business credit have all been cut, except for, the big guys. They still get their business credit, even though they're billion-dollar corporations. They have lines of credit.
They don't. It's not even that. It goes even worse than that. As soon as they go to the government and say, hey, guess what? We didn't make as much this year. We're in trouble. The government gives them a few $1 billion in your tax money, and you can't get a loan, but you're supporting how many bailouts that still have never been repaid in this country? Did you know that the American people were told that the bailouts amounted to about a little over something like $16 billion? I can tell you that the true number globally, and even in the United States alone, topped $16 trillion. And globally, our Federal Reserve, making our money for Americans, has bailed out companies on a global scale in excess of $70 trillion, and some say as high as $90 trillion. We're paying for that.
Right, and the amazing part is we give the banks the money. This is the fun part of it, of course. Give the banks the money so that they don't go out of business, so that the bank runs don't happen, et cetera, all that panic and everything else. And meanwhile, they were given this money to turn it back around and stimulate the economy. What did they do with it?
They didn't stimulate the economy.
No, not at all. They just held on to it and consumed other smaller banks, which would have been the only places that maybe locally you might have been able to get a line of credit, et cetera. Gee, does it look like the game is rigged, Roger?
Well, I wouldn't just say that the game is rigged, but what really infuriated me more than anything else was giving hundreds of billions of dollars to keep a company from going under, and then watching their CEO and their board of directors receive multi-million-dollar bonuses productivity bonuses at the end of the year. Productive for what? For scamming the American people out of trillions of dollars? If that's the case, they should have got a much bigger bonus than what they got. But you exist as a company today because you took money out of my pocket, but yet your CEO and your board of directors are getting $2, $3, $4, $5 million bonuses. These are the people I would like to take their head and pop it against the wall enough that I leave a blood mark as they fall to the ground.
And who could blame you? But you know what the problem is? That so many people don't realize this. And I've heard the argument. Now, I'm going to throw this at you. I know I don't want to make
I know what you're going to say.
But people make the argument that, believe it or not, the bailouts have actually been repaid. Because, you know, after we bailed out a car company, we bailed out the banks, and actually that money was repaid, Roger.
You know how much of it has been repaid?
Go ahead.
Less than 40%.
Right.
Now, if we're talking the real number, not the number they tell us, but the real number of $16 trillion within the U.S. alone, okay? And we're saying that maybe 6 or 7 trillion of that has been paid back at the most. Who do you think is suffering due to the monetary inflation caused by our inability to pay that money back, which means the Fed is earning interest on every one of those dollars we can't pay back to them? So all it has done is made the fat cats fatter, and which is basically the big corporations and the Federal Reserve, and put a load on the backs of us and our children that can, and here's the word, no matter what they tell you, can never be repaid. The U.S. debt is totally insurmountable. Our unfunded liability right now approaches $1 quadrillion if everything is taken into account. Everything on this planet.
Right.
How do you ever pay that back?
You don't. You don't. But
yet they're telling us we have a $17 trillion national debt. That's one of the biggest lies. That's like saying there's only 6.7, 6.8% unemployment. Yes. It's a freaking lie.
Exactly. And the amazing part of this, here's what I really find the insult to the injury, which, of course, you know, there should be enough insult in the injury we've already discussed. But the amazing part to me is not only did they receive these direct payments, but considerations were slipped into all these things as well.
Yes.
Okay. There was, you know, loans made at no interest.
Yes.
Okay. Discussions of negative interest.
No date of repayment.
No date of repayment. So, in other words, and they tried, believe it or not, to push negative interest. Now people go, what are you talking about? Negative interest means basically you pay them to borrow the money. So here's the thing, Roger. I'm going to lend you $5, and I'm going to give you another $3 for borrowing the $5. You know, this is what this comes down to. And
I'll keep giving you money for holding on to that $5.
Absolutely, sure. I'm going to keep giving you. Actually, I'll keep giving you the money. You see. Okay. So apparently it is back up. All right. Wow, that was strange. All of a sudden got dropped. You with, let's see, trying to get Roger Landry and Michelle in, if we can just see what's going on here. And apparently I'm just on by myself. Oh, boy. No idea why that happened, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, we were in the midst of discussing something pretty important, I thought. But isn't that the way this always goes? All right. Let's just see what happens when we attempt to add everybody back in. Sorry for the distracted tone and all, and of course this is a wonderful night to have this problem. But what else is new, right? Let's see here. Sorry again, everyone. Let's just see what we can do. Alright. There's one. And now, let's see if we can add Roger in also. Calling, attempting to reach people. Roger, are you back with me? Oh, there goes Roger again. He was there, I thought I heard him take a breath, and then he was gone. Oh.
No.
There he is.
I don't know why, it just dropped, so I had to put myself back in.
I don't understand what's going on here, Roger, I'll tell you.
I didn't cross any lines, did I? I mean, it's my typical rant about typical things.
Well, right, and I can't see how corporatism would get me cut off, because that's one of the things
that we discuss every week, yes.
You got booted?
I don't know.
Oh, we're here now, all of us.
The whole thing went there, and I guess everybody's back, so sorry to the listening audience. I hope you guys are catching it. I know I'm sending it to the network, so it should be all right.
All right. Why don't you let me bow out, because my lovely friend Michelle is here, and I do not want to take up the time because I'm sure she has some very pertinent things to discuss with you. But I'm glad I got a chance to say hello to her. And Chuck, as usual, this has been a great conversation. It really has.
I'll tell you, and no matter what direction we go in, it's great because either you set them up and I knock them down, or the other way around. Usually, you get worked up and you're the one knocking them down, Roger. And I really love that.
Yeah, you just feed it. It's like feeding coal into that big, massive steam engine. Come here, Roger. Here's another shovel of coal. Go ahead, fire up, boy.
Oh, it's pretty much like kicking the junkyard fence with the dog lurking back and forth, and
oh yeah,
and you definitely bark, Roger. So
all right, but let me explain something to you. My bite is definitely as bad as my bark.
Well, absolutely, sir. Otherwise, I would not want to call you my friend.
Okay, have a great day, Chuck and Michelle. It is always a pleasure to see you. Knock 'em dead, people, and I will talk to you all next week.
Absolutely looking forward to it, Roger. Hopefully we don't get knocked off halfway in between again. But
we got through our hour. We got all the way through our hour.
Right. Okay. I think we did a pretty good little set of rants there too together. So turned out all right. And thank you again, sir. Can't wait until next week, and we will have more things to discuss, I'm sure.
All right. Bye, Michelle.
Bye. I'll talk to you soon.
So, stranger.
Hi, Chuck. How are you?
I'm all right. Now, you're here.
I am here, and I am here as your Liberty Beacon guest for the second hour.
On the Liberty Beacon night. Of course, that's the Liberty Beacon, not just Liberty Beacon.
No, it has to be the Liberty Beacon. Mr. Roger Landry would have our heads on a stick if you just say Liberty Beacon. And it is actually the Liberty Beacon Project, if we want to get technical.
Well, right, but he's often said to me off the air he doesn't like calling it a project all the time because he doesn't want to make it seem like there's just one action, because there are so many different things going on, so many different voices, which of course I feature every Tuesday on here. And well, you know,
I'm your favorite, but don't tell anybody. It'll be our secret, okay?
Look, you know, you just let the cat out of the bag. What am I supposed to do?
I am the Liberty Beacon golden child, is what we'll say. But we won't tell any of the other hosts, and we especially won't tell Roger.
No, don't tell Roger and don't tell Terry, because I want to make sure she still keeps feeding me people. And so let's talk about how you got involved with the Liberty Beacon. How about that?
She's a great coordinator. I'm really. I got involved with the Liberty Beacon was by being involved with you. For any new listeners,
one thing you're breaking up. You're breaking up a little, Michelle. I don't know if you can
have
hear me.
not listened previously in the last couple months. I was a guest on your show, and then I did a brief stint as your side. Hello.
Yeah, you're breaking up quite a bit, is what I'm trying to tell you. I don't know why. It's just.
Is it any better now?
Oh, there we go. Now you're.
Okay, great. It's Skype, and it's only with you. I don't know why Skype does not like me and you together, but it just always gives me problems with you.
Yeah,
so
Skype hates you.
I was involved with your show, and
last thing I heard was "and." Wow. Okay.
Okay, there you go. I'm sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, I know. So many. If it keeps up, I'm gonna.
If it keeps up, I'm gonna something. Oh boy, I don't know what it is with the Skype. You know what? If you want to try and reconnect, go ahead. But it's just crapping out on us here. This is the fun adventure of trying to do this stuff live. I like doing it live because occasionally the messy stuff is enjoyable, but sometimes it's just annoying, of course. And tonight's going to be one of those annoying nights, it looks like. I got pretty far with Roger, though, without too much of an issue, I thought. And thought we got some good points out there. And, was kind of proud of myself up to that point, even though I came in sort of really tired and, as Roger said, dejected sounding. I'm sure I do sound a little lower on the energy scale than I usually do. But, appears as though I may not be able to bring Michelle back in, which is odd, but at least the network is maintaining contact. So, all right then. Well, I'll tell you something. The transparency issue with Obama and the whole thing there, we went off on that. Of course, we did finally address the Earthship solutions, which I'm glad that we did because I was very much interested in following exactly how that develops, and I will do that so long as I'm able to keep doing a show. I will do that. But on top of that, though, when you look at this. Puppet presidency, I mean, of course, I've always said that, JFK was the last guy to actually be fool enough to believe he was in charge. Of course, I think Nixon thought he was in charge for about 5 minutes and also, rather famously decided that he was going to comport himself very similarly to other presidents in the past. But, regardless, since that time, I guarantee you that not a single one of these figureheads has really made a decision. So in that way, Obama's really no different than anybody else. But the spiraling, destructive nature of the time that he is presiding over is something that is remarkable. That is remarkable, and I'm glad that I no longer get called a racist because I guess I've completely changed the circles I find myself in. But generally speaking, when I would begin to speak out about this stuff very early on in his presidency, just like I mentioned about the TSA fiasco and him making snide remarks during his State of the Union, I would often be pilloried for being racist because obviously I don't like the fact that there's a black president. Well, personally, you know what? I would take a guy with 3 heads who was purple right now if he would just fix the mess that we're in. But since the president doesn't really wield that kind of power, I guess we're all kind of stuck in the same leaky boat. Michelle, have I been able to maintain you now?
Yes, I called in. We'll be good. Here I am via phone.
Okay. Good deal. Good deal. So, let's start again really quick. I know we've just killed a bunch of time here, and, I'm sorry about that, but nothing I could really do. So, anybody who has been listening to my show knows that you were part of it. And, yes. And of course, you wound up with the Liberty Beacon, which is why you're on tonight. So let's just talk about how that kind of went real quick, and hopefully the thing doesn't break up on us again.
No, I'm calling via my cell phone, so we're good. Worst case, the call will drop. I'll call right back. We should be fine. Of course, I got involved with you through being a guest. I was a guest on your show. You were doing a simulcast, and I was one of the featured speakers at my local March Against Monsanto in San Antonio, Texas, and that's how I got involved with you. You know, you invited me to do a show, and then I kind of stuck around, and I made you become my friend. And one night Roger was on a show, and I kind of caught the tail end of a show, and we just started talking about vaccines. And from there, it kind of just flourished. He said, I have to talk to you, and we have to talk more. And it just went from there. Actually, I don't know if you spoke about it, but I think the Liberty Beacon is finally going to release their own network, which is very exciting. And I'm going to be one of the featured shows on there, so that's super duper exciting, and I'm very excited to be a part of that.
Yeah, we briefly discussed it. We didn't get into too many details, but Roger had said that there's going to be a multimedia platform, which is going to be devoted to all of the people that we're talking about, you know, through the Liberty Beacon that I guess have been put there. I mean, there are people that do shows on different networks, like my show is on a different network, but you know, is partnered with the Liberty Beacon. But this will be like an exclusive place where only like the Liberty Beacon people will be at, and you're going to be one of those hosts, right?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. So I've been kind of hanging out in the Liberty Beacon host pool, but not really hosting under the Liberty Beacon name. So I'm pretty excited to finally be doing that and to be a part of that group, because it's such a diverse group, and there's so many different people from so many different backgrounds, and we all basically want the greater good. And I mean that in the legitimate sense, not the BS sense that the government tries to put upon us. The greater good. Oh my goodness, just that term usually makes me sick, so I use it ironically almost.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing about the Liberty Beacon in general, and this is what attracted me to it in the first place, is that anyone who is essentially dedicated to revealing the truth, to setting people free in a social way and in an activist way, any sort of way that you're willing to contribute to the conversation, that you're willing to be a part of the solution regarding the lies and the deceptions and the poisons which have been hoisted upon us as a people, and that means globally, by the way, not just here in the United States, but as a global idea. Many voices, not necessarily all agreeing with one another, even though it sounds like it, because Roger and I seem to agree on just about everything. It's not necessarily that I had to agree with him in order to work with him. He was very much interested in all the stuff I talked to him about intelligence agencies and things like that, and that's a problem that needs to be addressed. For you, the reason why you really came to my attention wasn't even the March on Monsanto thing, but it was really the discussion we had afterwards, where we discussed vaccines, and this is another danger, that is being hoisted upon us again. I mean, look, there's the military-industrial complex, there's the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, there's the on and on and on. And they all do work actually hand in hand, don't they?
Yes, they do, and actually, I don't know if you have any particular direction you wanted us to go in tonight, but that was kind of what I was hoping to talk about a little bit, because I'm the crazy vaccine autism lady. That's just what it all comes back down to for me, But for those of you that aren't familiar and haven't apparently, read mainstream media news or even the alternative news, I hate to use that term, but there has been something called a CDC whistleblower. If you're on any social media site, you need to search that tag. You need to search on Twitter, you need to search on Facebook, Instagram, whatever platform you use, you need to look. About 2 weeks ago, one of the head doctors in the CDC that was a part of a study that was conducted in Atlanta, Georgia, to correlate the prevalence of autism in boys that had the MMR vaccine was covered up and lied about, point blank. The CDC conducted this study, and I believe it was in 2007, and it was on young black boys, African-American boys under the age of 36 months, getting the MMR vaccine. The CDC reported to the American public that there was no correlation, that everything was normal, there wasn't an increase, there was nothing, except there was a 340% increase that these children were more likely to be autistic. Let me tell you guys this one more time. The CDC conducted a study on black boys under the age of 3 that had the MMR vaccine. They said that everything was normal. The actual study revealed that these boys were 340% more likely to be autistic. This was their own study. They lied about it. They covered it up, and they're still covering it up. It took a week and a half before mainstream media even picked up the story. The only reason they did was because Anonymous, the group with the Guy Fawkes mask. And anyways, they issued a warning to the CDC saying you need to release this information or we're going medieval on you. So CNN and Fox, they're starting to pick it up, but they're of course skewing it, saying, well, this whistleblower is saying these things, but we all know it's not true. I mean, even though the documentation has been shown. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's fine, but this is, and people say, well, why would they do this, and et cetera, et cetera. It's no surprise, and it's not based on a racial. I don't bring this up because of the racial element here. I don't really care. I heard you say that these were black males, but it really
it was just a study. It was just that particular study, I think it was.
Right, but the thing is, historically speaking, it has been more acceptable to conduct these types of examinations on the African American community. All you have to do is look at the Tuskegee experiments, not just the airmen, not just the red tails, ladies and gentlemen, but look at the Tuskegee experiments. You can find that they utilized placebos instead of curing people's venereal disease, so they could study exactly how destructive it was. This is not a new thing, but here's the fun part about it is that the actual damage that's being done by this stuff has been understood by the scientific community over the past at least 2 decades, from what I understand. I am willing to say that it's got to have been a lot longer than that. But yeah, vaccines are just poison. There's no two ways about it. I mean, we broke down some of this stuff on earlier shows about the particular components. But the MMR vaccine, okay, the one that you're talking about, this is the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, right?
Yeah, yes. That is the one that's been tied. That was the first vaccine that really had the mainstream tie, the mainstream link with autism by, of course, Dr. Andy Wakefield, whom we've discussed in the past. He was the first one he's a gastroenterologist. He said, I studied these autistic children, and they all had measles in their gut, in their intestinal lining. He is the first person that really kind of brought that out. It had been studied before, but he's the first person that brought it out in public and consequently demonized and pretty much sacrificed. They pretty much hung him on the cross, so to speak, because he's been our sacrificial lamb. And I apologize, but yes, it's the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and that's the one that everyone always associates with autism. So here's another just kicker, because guess what? It's true. For the record, the DTaP was actually the one that, the one that injured my son. And I've heard the most prevalent ones are DTaP, the chickenpox, Hep B, MMR, of course, and now the HPV vaccine, Gardasil. Lots of girls are becoming paralyzed and even dying from it. These are the ones that I've heard the most injuries from. And that's more just personal experience, but I really hear DTaP and MMR quite often. So it's more than just MMR. I hear people say, well, I just won't give them the MMR. It's not just MMR. They all have these heavy metals, aluminum, formaldehyde, fetal cells, pig blood cells. I mean, it's just absurd. And mercury. And so the same whistleblower, the same doctor, you keep in mind he works for the CDC, released emails showing the cover-up of the danger of thimerosal, which of course is mercury, in flu vaccines for pregnant women. Right. They did a study. They found out that it was conclusive that it is not safe for a pregnant woman to have mercury injected into her body directly. And one of the directors said, oh, well, this wasn't very conclusive, so let's go ahead and leave that out. I'll send you a screenshot of that email.
Well, and here's another problem. Here's another problem with that. Yeah, it's not safe for pregnant women to have. But here's something that Roger had discussed with me on the show once, and I know you know about this. The acceptable level for a fetus sharing blood with its mother during, in utero. This is not even remotely part of the safe level, according to the EPA. This is something like 2,000 times the acceptable level of mercury, which is kind of weird to me that there's an acceptable level of mercury for a fetus which doesn't have its own immune system, which doesn't have a blood-brain barrier yet, which doesn't have any of the defenses that it would require to fight off a toxin. And thimerosal is nothing but a toxin, essentially. What is the benefit versus that damage? None. It's absolutely astounding, right?
You nailed it. You more than nailed it. There is, the EPA says that these are unsafe levels, but the CDC kind of backtracks and says, no, it's completely safe, don't worry about it. Come on, you can't do that. That's not the way things work. And it's... Well,
the other weird thing about this is the MMR vaccine. Okay, unlike the Hep B and the chickenpox vaccine and all of these other new sort of contraptions that the pharmaceutical industry has introduced, and I do call them contraptions instead of concoctions because I just have my reasons. But the thing is, this is something that's been around a long time. Even I got an MMR vaccine when I was a baby. It took a little while. They didn't give it to me right away for certain reasons, but they generally gave this to newborns even in my generation. But however, here's the kicker on that. They've actually added to the MMR vaccine, haven't they?
Yes, and that's the thing too. They keep on adding more and more and more to these vaccines. And so when you give a child 4 vaccinations at a visit, you're really giving them 16, 17, 20 different diseases simultaneously. Never mind the additives. Just the diseases and viruses themselves is not a safe thing to do to a child with absolutely no immune system. And of course, there is no blood-brain barrier, as you discussed. And then we give them Tylenol, which depletes their glutathione. So it's an attack on our children, on us. And what just disgusts me so much is they know it. And so, I've had this discussion with several people, and Terry Joyce is actually someone that I had, an interesting conversation about, is why is the government doing it? And there's a lot of different variables of why they could be doing it.
Well, before you go there, there's something else I want to add to this, because, and I know you'll agree with me here. If you also look at the contents of a lot of what they sell as, diaper creams, what they sell as, baby washes and things like this, a lot of this stuff contains things that go hand in hand with this garbage. They also not only get attacked from what they're consuming, not only getting attacked from what they're being injected with, and forget about the baby formulas, et cetera, et cetera. There is a whole range of stuff that is attacking infants. And not only that, but there are topical stuff. There are topical things which are also dangerous, especially in conjunction with all this other stuff. So it seems as though it's a complete circular, complete surrounding of the infant population on all sides that they could possibly be exposed to these biochemical agents, which is what I'll call them. Do you disagree with that?
Not at all. Not one bit. Look at water. There is water marketed nursery water, baby water, that has added fluoride, extra fluoride, because the babies don't have enough fluoride. We need to give them extra. And what really gets my goat is people try to justify fluoride by it makes your teeth stronger. Babies don't have teeth. Why are you giving a 1-week-old child water with fluoride in it to strengthen their teeth? That is the biggest line of crap I've ever heard. Fluoride is a known neurotoxin.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Just damage your baby's brain. Great idea. And it's so hard as a parent because, again, this is something that I've talked about with you and Kim. This is what we were taught. This is what we were, even when you did do research, you thought you were doing the right thing and asking doctors questions. And they still said, no, it's safe. Don't worry about it. And it took the canaries in the mine. It's really what it was. And so many of our kids have been the sacrificial lambs.
And unfortunately, what we've seen is a huge explosion across the board, not just in the black population, not just in any particular racial population, but across the board, we see this explosion in autism. There is now, and I argue that sometimes it's the expansion of the diagnosis, but on the other hand, we're seeing more and more, I hate to put it this way, but damage, essentially, to children which are not prepared, because let's keep in mind that the blood-brain barrier is not developed until between 18 and 24 months of age for a human being. Like, we're not like other animals where we can come out of the womb and walk around, like you see a horse, you see, some other animals that are out there. Their infants can immediately walk, they can immediately feed themselves, they can immediately do a lot of things. Our infants are not done developing from a neurological standpoint, and that doesn't just mean the brain, but the entire neurosystem is still in development. So all of these attacks are occurring on a completely uninsulated, undefended neurosystem. And this is where the problem is. It's not like just the newborns. I had a son a couple of months ago, and they stuck him with the vitamin K before I got him out of there. But he hasn't had a single thing since, and he still looks plenty aware and plenty happy. And, he's cranky sometimes and all, but...
he's a baby.
He's a baby, exactly. And I know I'm not being perfect, but I'm definitely not going to be a party to injecting this toxic crap into him. It's that simple. So,
vitamin K is the lesser of the evils. So, that's the good news.
Yeah, well, they snuck that one kind of by me there. It was...
I would rather have the vitamin K over, Hep B any day. Oh. Any day. And it's so funny when they try to justify it, because I'm sure your son isn't out there getting tattoos or doing drugs or having unprotected sex, so I'm not really sure how they contract it.
And it's funny that you say that, because that's exactly the point I made to the pediatrician in the hospital, because they said, well, we really want to give him this before he leaves. And I said, no, you're not. And here's why. You tell me where the justification is for this. What do you mean? I said, well... who generally contracts hepatitis B? It would be people involved in certain behaviors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, which behavior is my newborn son going to partake in? And the guy kind of looked at me for a moment. He said, well, you have a point there, and I don't necessarily agree with it either, but it is part of the schedule.
Oh, my gosh, really? Oh, my God, I wish I could have had that recorded. That's amazing. That's pretty good. I am very proud of you. That makes me so happy.
No, it's absolutely true. It was like, well, I sort of understand what you're saying, but this is what they tell me to do.
This is what they tell me to say.
Yeah.
If I can backtrack a little bit on the prevalence of autism.
Please do.
So, in the 1980s, it was 1 in 10,000. So, let me just say this. This has all been during my lifetime. For those of you that don't know, I'm 28 years old. I have a 6-year-old son. My son was vaccine injured with his second dose of DTaP, and he was diagnosed with severe low-functioning autism at 2. So he hasn't been vaccinated since 15 months. Now, during my lifetime, in the 1980s, autism was 1 in 10,000. When Vincent was diagnosed, it was 1 in 110. He was diagnosed in 2009. 2010. 2010. We discovered it in 2009. It was 1 in 110. Earlier this year, the CDC released numbers of 1 in 50. Now, this 1 in 50 was derived from numbers in 2008 for children 7 and older. Now, this doesn't even include my 6-year-old son, who's been autistic he's been autistic since he was probably about a year old. And this doesn't include him. And he's 6 years old. He's in 1st grade. And 2008, 7 and older. And most autistic individuals are diagnosed before the age of 5. Most of them are diagnosed between 2 and 3. It's usually when it happens. Now, what's really just mind-blowing is this new study it's an old study. Oh, God, that's even worse. So this whistleblower, this was an old study. This was back from years ago. The number's actually 1 in 11.
Wow.
1 in 11 children are autistic, and this is from 2007. Recently there was I don't remember which university, I want to say Columbia, I could be incorrect. It was an Ivy League school that figured by 2025, autism will be 1 in 2 people. 1 in 2 people will be autistic. Now, on that, let me backtrack a little bit to something you said. Better diagnosis. And a better diagnosis and a broader spectrum. I definitely acknowledge that the DSM-5 has kind of, gave us the shaft, and that they just lump it all together now as autism spectrum disorder. It's considered ASD, Asperger's, autism, PDD, NOS. All of those are under the ASD umbrella. So now everybody's autistic.
Right.
However, Asperger's has always been considered autism. I mean, it wasn't classic can autism, but it's still autism, and it was still considered as such. Regardless, 40% of autistic individuals are low functioning, meaning they can't talk, meaning they can't wipe their butt, meaning they can't go and cook themselves dinner. They cannot function on their own. 40% of those 1 in 11. So you can't just say it's better diagnosis. You can't say it's just, a bigger pool to diagnose from, because if anything, this wider spectrum just includes more higher functioning individuals. So if 40% of that still is super low functioning, there's just no way that it can all be put on better diagnosis. It's impossible.
not at all. It's just part of the conversation here that...
it's definitely a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the CDC did that too. I'm sorry.
No problem. But if you extrapolate the numbers backwards, what you find is still, even if you consider that you could remove 60% of the individuals from the autistic spectrum, you still have a huge exponential increase. And what increased over that particular amount of time? Well, it seems to me as though the pharmaceuticals have gotten more prevalent. We have more, there's more pregnant women taking SSRI drugs. There's obviously more GMOs than there ever was. This stuff has all gone up incrementally. So all of these factors contribute. But even if you can completely remove that argument from the table by turning around and using the old DSM on this, you'll find that it's still exponential. So,
yeah.
What do you, and let's just say this too, because your son was in worse shape at one point.
Oh, yeah.
And what did you do? Because, I probably brought this up with you before, but I think it's worth repeating. What did you do to try and detoxify him a bit, give him a chance to heal some? Obviously, some of the damage is irreparable, but you have actually, dialed it back a bit. So I would like to focus on that for a moment, too, when you get a chance.
Of course, I was going to bring up something and I forgot what it was. But I think that's something that we forget about too. Is I'm over here preaching about vaccines, they kill you. Oh, I remember what I was going to tell you. And it goes off a little bit more of what you said. I'm just going to expand on it. That I don't say that Vincent's autism was caused by his vaccines. Vincent's autism is environmental, which means yes, he was vaccine injured. There were immediate medical repercussions immediately within hours that I knew happened. But he also, had developmental issues as well. So he also had GMO soy formula. He also had a plethora of antibiotics and vaccines and just crap that was given to him because it was covering up his vaccine injury. So I don't know what caused his autism. I don't know what finally just turned off that light. It could have been anything. It could have been chemtrails. It could have been, formula. It could have been his vaccines. I don't know. But it was environmentally derived. So there's that. Now, what you can do to help. I think that's something that I forget about sometimes because there's so much help and there's so much hope. And the first thing I did, and I found this all through social media, so anyone that says that you can't do things to the internet is full of it because, I ended up here and I helped my son speak via things I learned on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I read Jenny McCarthy's book, and I was like, that crap is crazy. I'm not doing that. They're quack. But you know what? It made me feel warm and fuzzy. And then I got in a fight with someone on Twitter. You should come to this conference. So I went to this conference. I go to all these different little talks by amazing, world-renowned doctors. And that's when it occurred to me. I was like, oh, my God, my kid's vaccine injured. It's my fault. And then someone sits me down and says, Michelle, what is your kid eating? Why haven't you put him on the diet yet? And in autism, it's known as the diet. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's crazy. She goes, look, try it for a month. If it doesn't work, then don't do it. But if it works, you just helped your kid by changing what he eats. So, the diet, the famous autism diet, and this was the turning point for us. Gluten-free and casein-free, which is basically no wheat, no dairy. And so those of you that don't know, gluten is in everything from your salad dressings to your meat to your Band-Aids to your crayons. It is literally everything.
Right.
And my son had a very severe allergy to it. He would vomit and have diarrhea everywhere and then had immediate behavior repercussions as well. And dairy as well. Casein is the protein in dairy, and gluten is the protein in wheat. So I removed those two things from his diet. It's not as hard as it sounds. We've been doing it for 5 years, 4.5, 5 years now. It really isn't that difficult. There's a little bit of a change, but once you learn, it's worth it. If someone tells you, hey, if you quit feeding your kid macaroni and cheese, they'll talk, you're going to quit and you're going to throw every box of macaroni and cheese in your house away. And that's exactly what happened. I threw every box of macaroni and cheese in the house away, and my kid started talking. Chuck, 2 weeks after putting him on the diet, my son went from being nonverbal, having the communication ability of a 9-month-old, to saying 3-word phrases from changing what he ate.
Right.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right, that's the thing, is that really this is all environmental. A key thing, though, and part of that environment is obviously what was injected into his bloodstream and injured him in the first place. So I would say that there was no way that didn't contribute to it. That's for sure. But all these other things were pretty much locking him up. And this is the thing. This does this to all of us in one way or another. If we're not careful, if we're consuming garbage, you know the old adage, you are what you eat. You know, the more garbage you consume, the more garbage you become. You know what I mean? And I hate to insult anybody who, doesn't try to avoid this stuff, but, I mean, it's the reality here. And, in developmental stages, it can be so detrimental that it's not even an issue. And, of course, if somebody just simply told you, if you have a non-communicating child, if somebody said, listen, all you got to do is get rid of this crap out of their diet, and you won't be faced with that anymore. I mean, you were literally faced with a child that was never going to have a chance to be able to really function socially in a school situation at all. You went from that to now he is actually able to do a lot of things, right? I mean, I've heard him speak myself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want people to think that I suddenly killed my son overnight. He's still very autistic. My son is still very, very autistic and is probably going to live with me for the rest of my life and the rest of his life. However, when he was diagnosed by his neurologist, he said, look, just put him in a home. You're probably just going to institutionalize him. He's never going to talk, have a nice life. And that was it. Vincent would bang his head. Vincent would bite himself. He had no way of communicating. He couldn't even point. He literally would just cry. He had the communication of a 9-month-old, and he was a full-size toddler, 2, 3, 4-year-old. And so this built up, and like I said, we started diet, and diet worked. I'm like, holy crap, this crazy stuff is for real. So then I'm like, well, what do I do now? So then we moved on to some healing of the gut, some probiotics. And these are all things that will benefit you and I. I get accused sometimes of being a dirty tree-hugging liberal, and I'm not. I'm not at all. However, I'm telling you, man, take the Cheetos out of your diet, and you're gonna feel so much better. It sucks because I love Cheetos and I love bread. We're Italian. God, I love bread and I love pasta and I love cheese and I love all of it. But if you take it out of your diet, you feel so much better. You sleep better. You think clearer. You lose weight. You don't feel like you have a brick in your gut. It's crazy. But so probiotics. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No problem. But an interesting thing to note here, because we brought up Andrew Wakefield earlier, was his studies on Crohn's disease and the fact that the digestive system having been affected by a lot of this stuff also. Notice how it walks hand in hand, right? You can't properly digest this stuff. Maybe if you weren't being toxified from elsewhere, maybe the bread and cheese wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't loaded with a bunch of chemicals and everything else. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad, but as things stand, it's not good for you, and it does suck, because believe me, I enjoy some bread, some cheese, some gluten-loaded stuff. I do enjoy.
Oh, yeah. It's comfort food, and here's the thing is we're addicted to it because it's almost like a drug, and it's meant to be that way. So, where was I going? Oh, and on that, note with Crohn's disease, it's funny that, I'm sure you've seen this, the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. I'm not going to state my opinion about it because it's not my place. But I think we should definitely explore a little bit about ALS, what causes it, and ways to treat it. Because guess what? ALS, Alzheimer's, Crohn's, diabetes, autism, ADHD. These things are all very similar in treatment and in causation. A lot of it is heavy metal toxicity. Mm-hmm. And guess what's in vaccines? It just...
And Parkinson's,
so many, and Parkinson's.
Yeah.
Yes.
To this conversation as well. And I mean, and if you don't think that that's a big effect, remember this, that Parkinson's and even restless leg syndrome are linked. So, these kind of, and what it all comes down to is a problem with the neurological system. So, what would be the gain? Again, what is the cost-benefit analysis for the particular human being if a baby could make its own decisions regarding allowing its own neurosystem to be attacked and toxified, before it is even secured into itself? Like I said, 18 to 24 months before that blood-brain barrier even becomes a reality. We don't come out of the womb with all the defenses that we need. This is a reality, and it's just something that it does astound me. And people, even in their adult lives, like you said, probiotics, all of these things are very effective.
Essential oils are amazing. Bentonite clay, taking it orally and taking baths is amazing for detoxing. So are Epsom salts. Like Epsom salts are such a basic thing you can do for your basic wellness, and it makes you feel so much better. Just trust me. Go back, get a bag of Epsom salts, put a couple handfuls in a warm bath, sit in it for 30 minutes. You're going to sleep like a baby. You're also probably going to poop like a baby, but your body will be regulated. You'll detoxify. You'll feel so much better. Cilantro, the herb, it is an herb. It's an herb that's often used in Mexican cooking. It's a natural chelator, meaning it helps get rid of the heavy metals. It helps you detox. True organic green tea, black teas, true ones, organic ones that aren't full of crap and pesticides and GMOs. These also help you detoxify. There's so many things you can do. And just supplementing your immune system to further that. If we're talking about supplementation, taking some D3, taking magnesium and zinc, and having a healthy gut, that is the most amazing thing you can, and vitamin C. These are the most amazing things you can do for your immune system. Vaccinations are not the same as having an immune system, and that is what is so often forgotten. Immunity and vaccination are two very, very different things, and they do not go hand in hand. In fact, they're almost opposites of each other.
Yeah, I was just going to go with that, actually, is, the difference between immunity and vaccination, because a lot of people, still cling to the idea that you need to be vaccinated against something in order for your body to deal with it. But here's the thing, when your body is exposed to something, naturally, it develops a defense all by itself. This is the way it works. At least, that was the way it was explained to me in biology class. I don't know, maybe things have changed, but it doesn't seem to have, does it?
Well, I think vaccines are a great concept, and it makes a lot of sense, and it makes sense in the way you just explained it. Your body's exposed to a virus, and it learns to fight it. It makes sense. However, it doesn't make sense to inject formaldehyde into someone's body, to inject lethal doses of aluminum in someone's body. So it's great in concept, but so is communism. So, the concept doesn't really work out now, does it? Human nature has gotten in the way. Greed has gotten in the way, and it works actually on both of those tangents. Mm-hmm. It comes down to greed. So, to go on that a little bit on the greed aspect, I touched briefly, I've had a lot of people say, well, why do you think it is? I've heard Agenda 21. I've heard someone say they're trying to make a master race of high-functioning Asperger geniuses. I think personally, I think a bit of it is they didn't expect it to get this out of control. That's why they're changing the DSM, because when we widen the spectrum, it doesn't seem like quite such an epidemic. And you say, well, no, we added all these extras in there. And that's what they're trying to do. So I think the greed took over. They didn't expect it to be like this, and now they're scrambling and saying, holy crap, what are we going to do now? And now they're trying to cover it up and figure it out.
Yeah, well, see, I don't see it that way, because it seems to me as though a much more pliable population is so much easier to control when...
That was my second point.
When they're very dependent. Okay, well, go ahead and make it then. I don't want to take it from you. Go.
Oh, no, you and I, we definitely see eye to eye on so many things, and that's why we work well together. But no, that's exactly what I think it is that they can control us. It costs $2 million to raise a child until they're 18 years old with autism. The government has us by the proverbial balls. Like, so many of us are stuck. And that's why you hear about this is another subject, about these mothers killing themselves and their children. They have these severely autistic kids, and they've done everything they can. And look at Alex Spartalakis. He was very ill. He had gut issues. Dr. Wakefield went and saw him. The hospital took him away from his mother, said, no, he needs psychotropic drugs. They drugged this kid up for 2 months. He was crapping everywhere all over the room. He was just naked on the bed, tied down. And she's like, no, he's having stomach problems. He needs help with his stomach. And they didn't even scope him. They refused. They just drugged him. They eventually released him, and a couple months later, she killed him, and she killed herself. And what does it say? And I'm sure your listeners can come up with their own opinion about this. And I'm definitely not encouraging it whatsoever. Never. However, how desperate must someone feel to decide my child is better off dead than in this world without me? And I think that the government has definitely put a lot of people in that position, because it's lifetime of, great, now I got to be sucking on the government's teeth, and I'm going to barely scrape by. I had a 6-figure income, and I was living like I was on a poverty level because I was spending so much on my son's needs.
Well, right.
And that's exactly what you said. It's a matter of control. It's always a matter of control.
Well, that's the thing. Also, if the aged population, because people say, well, what about the rest of us who weren't quite so damaged by all this stuff? Well, the problem is that those of us that care about our offspring are going to sit there and try and take care of them, and this also keeps us rather occupied, so that we don't pay very much attention to what's going on around us, while our freedoms disappear, while our government writes checks on our behalf on all sorts of issues and gives them to various other supposed entities around the world, etc., etc. Don't pay attention to the guy behind the curtain at all, because you are too busy dealing with the lights in your house. You know what I mean? And this is what the thing is. It actually is a very effective way, in my opinion, to not only, and I hate to use this term, but to dumb down the population in a way, but also to make them more controllable. So there may be a way in some cases, because I've heard that argument about the Asperger's super genius deal. When you actually have to deal with that's so much silliness to me, and I'll tell you why. To actually deal with somebody who is a severe Asperger's person requires so much more difficulty than dealing with your average serial killer. You'd be better off just recruiting the genius serial killers. You know what I mean?
Because they have no social skills whatsoever.
Well, right. So even if they can figure out every single thing that you want them to figure out, they may not be able to tell you.
Exactly.
And to remain in a room with you is something, where forget it, and plus don't expect any of them to work in a group. That's not going to happen. Okay. So you can't even create groupthink or crowd control regarding, like your general sort of mind control, et cetera, et cetera. It's not even possible. So,
That's a great point.
but it's one of those
I'm laughing
things,
because it's so true.
Yeah, but here's the. I mean, look, if you object to what I'm saying, please do. But I mean, that's the way I see it. I've always found that to be a silly thing where they want to create super geniuses by this way. It's like, there are so many better ways to do it, and they're well aware of how to do it. That this would be a very, very, very poor strategy. And one thing that we can't accuse the elites, the people in control, the corporate entities that do seem to rule our country and our world at this point, one thing we can't accuse them of is poor strategy. Because it is ubiquitous. There is no escape from it. If you wish to eat, breathe, drink, or even exist on this planet, you will be touched by these people at this point because they have absolutely infiltrated every aspect of life. So, to go with that kind of conspiracy theory, I can't stand when I hear stuff like that, to be honest with you. But look, we're rounding. We're just about out of time, which unfortunately I chewed up some of it with a little technical issue and all that kind of stuff. Couple of things. One, you got that show coming up. Do you have a name for it or any other information on it?
I don't, because I'll talk to you about it off air. We've had a little bit of switcheroo. However, you can find me over at NWO Truth Radio on Monday nights. Excuse me, not Monday. Yeah, on Monday nights. We have Ladies' Night on Monday nights. It's under New Direction, so it's kind of my baby now. And you can catch us at 9 Central.
Oh. Thanks for listening, guys.
Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was but I have the files. I read the stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, that guy, how can that be possible? The brain, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the cartoon comes from, as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to have just read two sources whenever I try.